Hey, you like cars? We're back again. Another episode of the CarQuicks podcast, the infamous, the famous, the world-known, the worldwide broadcasted episode 66. You already know what time it is, season 2. And we're going to drive right in. Before I do, how y'all doing out there? Are you doing good? I'm doing great. The weather was nice today in Texas. It wasn't blazing as it normally is. I actually woke up and went outside and I was like, is that a cold front I feel? Do I feel the tinge of a breeze over my neck? Do I feel the coolness coming? Listen, anytime it's fall and winter out here in this state, I take full advantage, okay? Now, I don't want to live in the winter, so I'm not even going to try to talk about East Coast and when I used to live over there, because I don't want that. I'll just deal with the heat. We might complain about it, talk about it. It gives us material to joke about. But fall's coming soon, so I'm feeling that. But how's the family, your friends? Thanks for joining. If you haven't told a friend or a colleague or a workout partner or the person at yoga you stand next to, let them know that the CarQuicks podcast is giving them their fulfillment of the automotive news, opinions, and anything else you want to do, okay? Anything else I provide, it's giving it to you. So let's just drive right into this episode and just talk about a couple things, right? There's something that's been going on interesting, and there are some other things that are just, par the course for the news. But there's a few things in this little episode, so let's just, get your snacks, get your drinks. Let's get ready. Now, first things first, we're going to talk about the Corolla. Not Corolla Updates. That's at the end of the podcast. It's your favorite portion, I know. Now, we're going to talk about the 2025 model. Now, I've already talked about it in a YouTube video. And again, besides liking and subscribing and following this podcast on whatever channels and formats you do to listen to podcasts, the YouTube videos and the YouTube channel goes by the same name. And the reason why I mention that is because there's a video portion of this podcast that you should really watch, because a lot of the things that I talk about, a lot of the things that I reference or show or say look on the screen is because I'm talking to a camera, okay? Even though you might listen to the audio side, almost every podcast that I listen to now in this world has a video portion to it. So I'm the same way. Now, the 2025 GR Corolla, I had a video, I'm going to put it up on the screen for when I did on my YouTube channel, just talking about the differences and the changes and, if I was going to upgrade, if I was going to trade in, things of that nature, just having a discussion, right? So the price point and the price of this car finally came out, and let me tell you something. It costs more money. It now starts at $39,995, which is approximately $3,000 more than it was in 2023-24. We are living in a time when stuff just costs astronomical, okay? I mean, as of this recording, I just came from some fast food chain and I went to go get some food for myself and the family. Just figured out if I cooking tonight, let's just go get some regular food. It's not even really that great for you, but I'm lazy, okay? $32 later, okay? I mean, what's really happening out here? I don't know. So the MSRP for the GR Corolla for 2025 has gone up by $3,000 and now starts at $39,995, which is really just all the marketing gimmick to make you think that it isn't really starting at $40,000, because it is, okay? That $5, you're not even going to see it, because by the time you walk into the dealership, and you already know how Toyota dealerships do, unfortunately, and Toyota, the OEM, doesn't really have power over how these dealerships operate. But for the most part, especially in Houston, Texas, these Toyota dealerships out here are wild, okay? The few that might honor some MSRP are few and far between, okay? I'm just going to be honest. You really got the battle and fight. And the GR Corolla is one of those cars that they're going to try to jack prices on and still try to put ADM on, which is crazy considering interest rates in the market. And it's just, everybody's like, listen, for the people that can afford to even have a new car or even get a car that's more fun to drive and cost a certain point, I mean, like, can we put down the barriers of entry? Please. Now, the $3,000 does come with some additional things, and I'll just reiterate those. So all the models now that come from the Motomachi factory have the differentials that we had to get as a performance pack on the 2023 and 24 models. Now, I'll say this. There was rarely any GR Corollas that did not have a performance pack. The few that did not were just rare occurrences. It's almost like the old school Evo RS models or something of that nature, or just really, really bare bones. So you didn't really see that many GR Corolla models that didn't have the performance pack on it and things of that nature. So every model now has it, so you don't have to worry about getting a performance pack model. The other creature comforts like climate control, it now has dual climate zone. I mean, I'm gonna try to find out if the parts to swap over to dual climate actually are simple, which at first I was like, it's not a big deal. But the funny thing is, when I'm with my son in the car, with my wife, both of them both get cold all the time. Like, I'm cold. Like, I put the vent up, he points to the window, windows fogging up. I'm like, I can't believe this. I thought he was a ride or die with me. But anyways, so you got dual climate control, you got softer materials inside. If you get the premium, you get heated seats, you get the suede inserts on the seats, you get the stitching. So that additional model will get you to like 42,000, 43. So it's going to be more money. That's what the creature comfort's on it. Then you have the Premium Plus, which is basically the Circuit Edition without the Circuit Edition wing that we got, which is another kind of knock to it that I say. You get the forged carbon roof, you get the additional colored stitching inside, you get the bulge hood on it, you get the vents. This also has another sub radiator, different front bumper design, better cooling, tweaks to the chassis, rebound springs, things to help perform better, to handle better. And also comes with 23 foot-pounds of more torque based on the tuning they did on the ECU. So now it has 295. So it's an improvement. You're not losing anything on the car. You're not giving something up. You're not relinquishing anything. Everything is exactly what you think it should be and more. So some people are going to look at this price point and say, if I was buying a performance pack prior, then for $3,000, I'm pretty much, if I add up the difference of that, maybe the argument I had to have with the dealership, it may not be as much more. But the point that I'm getting to is that it does cost more money. And that's kind of a problem. But I'll get to the more exciting part. And the exciting part about this is that Toyota is continuing to make this car. And that's really what all this matters to, right? So for car enthusiasts, for the people that are saying, hey, I want a fun car to drive. I want something that can not necessarily be the only thing that's point A to B and boring. I want something fun and exciting. I want to modify it. I want to change this. So seeing GR Corolla, seeing them continually being updated, seeing them getting tweaks and updates, even changing the front bumper. I mean, Toyota is really in a rarefied air now when it comes to a lineup of cars that are sporty. Considering what Honda's doing, what Mazda's doing, any of these manufacturers that you can think of that have had special cars. I mean, Nissan still has a Z, the GTR is on its way out, and then really there's nothing else left. I mean, there aren't many price points. At least Toyota is hitting price points from GR Corolla, GR86, all the way up to the Supra. So this is still coming out. The prices are higher. You do get some things in for that price, though nobody wants to see the MSRP continue to go up. So I don't know what's going to happen for the next following year, the following tweak. I don't know if they're going to change anything for 2026 model year, but they might add like Toyota Sense 3.0. But if they increase the price again, like $1,000, and like $1,000, I mean, we're just going to work our way to the point where they may just get rid of the car because the sales are dwindling down because everybody's saying, well, we started off at a $37,000 hot hatch that, I mean, obviously when you're done, it was $40,000. But now the price point starts at 40, gets to 43, 44. Or if you get the automatic transmission, the DAT, that's an additional $2,000. And a lot of people who are interested in the GR Corolla are going to go get that DAT transmission because they didn't want to have to be in traffic with a manual transmission. So you now have a $2,000 increase on that, plus the $3,000. You're talking about like $5,000. So if you get all the way to the top, to the Premium Plus automatic, let's just say standard core one, you're still looking at 45, 46, all the way to like $48,000, basically getting near to that 50. So if we increase the price point next year, then now we're crossing 50. If you do it again, you're 55. And so basically what I'm saying is if we keep going up, we get to the point where we talk about how, man, I remember we used to have all these fun cars and the prices went up and nobody bought them and then they canceled them. That's what happens. It's rinse and repeat. So hopefully Toyota does recognize that and doesn't really shift it too crazy to how much, these things can cost. But they do have some other models that are coming out. And just to kind of mention that, because we have we have the GR Corolla, we never had the GR Supra, we had the GR Supra, GR86, but I talked about in a video in my YouTube channel about a model that they're testing on the Nürburgring, the GRMN model, right? And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because clearly Toyota is, putting their foot down with what they're going to do to GR Corolla, and there is no Morizo one. The Circuit Edition isn't really called Circuit Edition anymore. They don't have them numbered. They switched it to a Premium Plus. So I suspect, and given now that I'm thinking about it, I'm talking in real time. Now that I'm thinking about it, if the Premium Plus is just like Premium Plus, like a more of a trim model with forged carbon roof and the stitching inside and the soft materials, but it doesn't really have much of a differentiator when it comes to the visual look of it like the previous Circuit Edition had, which, well, let me not say that. It doesn't have a wing, right? And it still has the bulge hood, so there is a difference. But the model that they're testing on Nürburgring, I'll show the picture here. I had a video on this as well. Again, check out the video. This one has clearly a much larger, pronounced rear wing, larger, wider front fenders with more vents, vent in the hood, different wheels, bigger, and everybody's suspecting that this might be a GRMN version, which stood for Gazoo Racing Meister of the Nürburgring, right? And so they have a GRMN version of the GR Yaris that had additional torque, additional stiffening, chassis bracing, more carbon fiber, lighter weight. It was more of a track focused model. Now that we have this version of 2025, it already has the added torque. In my video, I have my own prediction of, hey, we might get a bump in horsepower to like 330. We might get a bump in torque even further, 310. Maybe they swap out certain components of the ECU or the motor to make it stronger to handle that. Or we just focus on increased chassis tuning to make it incredibly, capable on the track. Maybe access, or maybe not access, but maybe addressing the transfer case, rear differential, overheating, telling the ECU we need to go in two-wheel drive mode. So I talked about this model being the one that replaces like the Morizo. But now that I'm thinking about the lineup they have now, it might just be the one that's where like we kind of put the circuit. The Morizo came, they made the version, they made 200 of them, and they're done with it. So either they're going to do the same thing with this one and make it a true special one and say, hey, we're only making 200 of these again. It's not going to be cheap. We're talking about the Morizo was 60,000, right? 53, 54. I have the numbers wrong, but we were getting close to 60. If they make this model with even more attention to track, attention to bespoke materials, attention to how things are performing, then we have a model that costs 65, 7. I mean, it can get pricey, and pricey in a way where what's going to happen is you're going to niche down on the people that want to buy it. And it might sound like there's no way anybody's buying something like this. And I'm like, that would be a mistake to think, because people that own cars like the GT3s and higher end luxury sports cars, they are going to see something like this and say, see, that's something unique and fun. Hatchbacks that are powerful and fun and unique and niche and very rare, they sell well, even though they're priced very high. It just, the people that can afford it come down and say, hey, I know that's a Toyota Corolla. I know I just pulled up in a Porsche 911, but I know what that is and I know what that can do, and I want the special edition one. So I've talked about this before at length, but I'm just saying, if we got the 2025 one for what they're charging, what it has on it, the GRMN version's coming, I really can see a very clear lineup of like what Toyota's going to do, especially when it comes to the GR Corolla. And continue on with Toyota. Toyota's going to be a theme on this podcast, letting you know, because they had a bunch of news that was just kind of floating around. And one of the other ones that happened, right, is we all know we can buy everything online, right? You can buy a house online. You can buy whatever you want on Amazon. You can even get, a whole car online. You can do everything online, right? So recently, in the streets of Alibaba, there was a chassis, a full-bodied AE86, the old school Corolla from Toyota, the one that was delivering sushi, the one that was drifting in all the videos that we have seen. Not sushi, the one that was delivering tofu. My bad. The one that has been in drift videos everywhere. So everybody has seen an AE86, right? We've seen them. You want them. I would love one. They cost an exuberant amount of money now if they're in good shape. If they weren't already I was trying to learn how to drift damage on it. If it isn't a rust bucket, whatever it may be, they cost. There's a whole entire body no engine, no electronics that you can buy for $9,500. I mean, it has the little dots on it. In the picture, you see little matrix dots on it, which is used for 3D scanning something and making sure you reproduce it the exact same way. So for what we suspect is that they created this body off of an AE86, and now they're offering it up for you to buy. Now, of course, some people are going to say, that's made in China, which, what's funny is like right now, the made in China thing, if you really sit down and think about it, it's almost no longer a knock, even though it kind of is. But I mean, thanks to the world of capitalism in the US and the lack of manufacturing in our own country, everything's made in China. So if it's made in the US, it's like, oh, snap, for real? Like, oh, you really do it here? Let me support you. But we got our iPhones made in China. And I don't think anybody's picking up an iPhone saying, hey, this isn't of quality. Nobody's knocking that. Now, I know standards of manufacturing in China based on who's doing it, who's dealing with the supplier, it varies greatly. But if this body can at least match whatever Toyota was doing in 1980s, which by 2024 standards, I would assume we have made it to. Like, I don't think they did anything that special where they're like, man, I don't know. Back then in 1983, they were really out there doing the proper welds. I think we can probably reproduce it. So you can get an entire A86 body chassis delivered to your door, though you need 5 of your friends to do it. You can't get one because at $9,500, if they allowed you to ship one, and they said on the website that it doesn't say you can't order one, but it does say in like fine print the minimum order is 5. I'm sure somebody's going to try to swipe a credit card and say, I'm going to try to order one, and maybe you'll get one big pallet showing up to your house, or maybe they'll say, no, you need to get 5 of your friends. And if you got 5 of your friends with more money than me that can just, throw $10,000 out there on a whim, y'all might end up with 5 gigantic pallets that show up, and you got the beginnings of a drift team, okay? I mean, if you can get this, couple K20s, T66 turbos, if anybody knows that reference, listen, you can really have a good time if this is really for real. And like, I don't know if anybody's ever going to find out. What we do know is that you can actually do it, which is really the fun part, because I mean, who doesn't like seeing that you can buy a whole chassis? Can we get some 240s? Please. I mean, you want to talk about immediately people trying to find out if it's true? Make a 180SX Sylvia, make a Sylvia S13 full body. Just make a full body, just the whole thing. You don't got to put the lights on. We can find the lights, but give us the full body of a 240, a 180SX, a S13. You're going to quickly see how fast people care. And we might be close enough to the fact that they might do this on R34 bodies, R33s. And really, at that point, you're going to have to get into the fine-tooth comb of VIN matching and somebody saying, okay, that a reproduction. But we're getting close to that. If they're doing reproduction bodies for old classic cars, we're not that far away from the JDM classes being reproduced and there being reproduction bodies everywhere just because you want the look of it. Every single classic car you see isn't exactly an authentic one from that era. A lot of them have reproduction parts in them or completely reproduced. Resto mods, if you will. Now, going into some cool news that we don't have all the information on it yet, but we know it's coming, and it's cool to just kind of do a history on this, and that is McLaren. So McLaren is readying the return of the 1 Series, right? And the 1 Series is their top of the line, the supercar. We say hypercar, supercar. Hyper and supercar is funny because the lines get blurred, and a lot of OEMs, the manufacturers that build these cars, just say supercar. Then you might have like a Koenigsegg or Pagani that says like hypercar. I think hypercar gets into when you have the crazy amount of horsepower, the 1,000 and above. But listen, the Corvette ZR1 has over 1,000 horsepower. So, I mean, we don't consider that a hypercar. We do consider it a supercar now. But just what I'm saying, the P1 and the F1, McLaren F1 was considered a supercar. The P1 fell into the hypercar. But they're getting ready to introduce a W1. I don't know what they're going to do when they get close to the end of this alphabet because they're already on W. So, ain't got too many letters left. But the F1 is the beginning of this 1 Series. And I don't know if anybody remembers, but just to go down memory lane for my own self, I remember when the McLaren F1, when I first read an article about the McLaren F1. And it was like, 1993, 94. It was in a road and track magazine. I remember it vividly. The cars on the front of it, it's like a top-down view. If I can find an image of this cover, I'm going to put it up on the screen. But I remember reading the article about the McLaren F1. And at that time, the internet wasn't interneting like it is now. So I wasn't privy to this happening, right? A lot of this information I used to get as a kid reading car magazines was me finding out right there on that issue what was happening in the automotive world. I didn't have it in real time like we do now. So I didn't know about an F1. I didn't know that Gordon Murray was out there with BMW building a crazy V12 with 627 horsepower and gold, inside the engine bay to dissipate the heat in 3-seat configurations, was a driver in the middle. I didn't know none of this. This was not a thing. And so if you think about how far back that car goes and how important it is now, it's crazy to think about. That was in 1990, early 90s, $1 million. Now they cost $20 million. But I mean, $1 million into today's standards and inflation, I'm sure it is $20 million. But that was in the early 90s, which is crazy to think how early that was that they're building something that nuts. And so then we get the P1, which, I mean, if you really think about the P1 like the Holy Trinity, when they had the Ferrari LaFerrari and a Porsche 918 Spider, I mean, those came out 2013. Which is nuts because, I mean, look how time flies. It's already 11 years that those came out. And those are stuck in our brain like these just happened. I remember the fights they had from companies trying to review all 3 cars at the same time. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but there was controversy of each OEM or rumors that Ferrari didn't want their car tested on the same time as a P1 and a 918, and Porsche saying we don't want any battle. We don't want them to be up against each other to compete. They had to get owners of these cars to allow them to drive them on the track. I remember in Top Gear finally got all 3 on the track. It was a big deal because when they all came out, everybody was like, we already know all 3 of these are competing. They have different, goals in mind, but out the door, everybody's like, we got to test these together. So it's been over 11 years now that those have been out. Ferrari is busy doing something in the streets. There has been rumors and there have been videos and images of some Ferrari that is obviously replacing a LaFerrari around Maranello, running around, and they don't know the name of it, but we already know what's coming. I don't know what Porsche's doing, but Porsche has hinted at maybe they do have something that replaces the 918, but we know Ferrari because we know their history going all the way down to the 250 GTO and the F40 and the F50 and the Enzo and so on and so forth. So we know they're building one. McLaren has one coming out. October 6th is when this should be released. If they're talking about that, it should show up and we should find out what it can be. The rumor is that it's some V8, brand new one that they never have built before. Horsepower numbers are charting somewhere above 1,200 horsepower. Wouldn't surprise me if it was more. It could be less because, I mean, lightweight and performance and trackability is what they're aiming for. I don't think they're chasing a straight line speed. The Bugatti Tourbillon has 1,800 horsepower. So if they were really trying to chase that thing down for top speed, they would have aimed a little bit higher, or maybe it can from aerodynamics. We don't know what it looks like. The rumor is that it has a little bit of P1 and a little bit of Senna. I will say this, though. I do hope that McLaren makes a bit of a new design because a lot of their cars look too similar to be at certain price points. Like you got the McLaren Sabre, which is basically based off of Senna, with more elaborate wings and carbon fiber and vents. You have the Speedtail, which has a front end that looks very similar to like a 750 or 675, or then the P1. It's like there's a lot of familiar. I can't even speak. There's a lot of familiar design in between all the cars. So I don't know if I really want to see that again on the W1. I feel like this should be the beginning of like, this is a fresh design. They can have cues to our history, but like we're moving forward with this. So we'll see what it looks like when it comes. You already know it's going to be nuts. If they're putting this much effort into this, you already know that this is their top of the line. The Speedtail was kind of like a special project, an homage to the F1 with a 3-seat configuration, but it wasn't their like 1 series. Which is interesting. That's why McLaren is an interesting company because they make so many models. And at some point, you're like, which one is like the one? And we got it. Couple weeks, we're going to find out. Now, keeping on with like supercars of that nature. I don't know if you've heard of, there's this company out there called Mansory. I say masonry, but that is that's a car, that is a trade, okay, not a car company. But Mansory is back in the news, right? And every time they're in the news, they make headlines because they are an aftermarket company that makes all types of wide body kits, wings, splitters, carbon, interior for the likes of the exotic car market. Bentleys and Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Porsches, they take those cars, blow them up. They take whatever the designer did, toss that out the window, and they do their own thing. Usually it's horrific. Okay, it's horrifying or it's beautiful depending on how good your vision is. Okay, it just depends. Okay, some of it I can kind of I can get with because I'm just like, I get it. I mean, like, you just want something that's just ridiculous, and they make ridiculous. And what they do is they basically take whatever it is that you have as like a Lamborghini Urus or a Porsche 911. They say, all right, you want everybody to notice you, and you may not have the greatest taste, or maybe you do because this is what you want, and we're going to build it for you. The latest one is the Ferrari Purosangue, and they called it the Mansory. See, there I go again. Mansory. I'm going to say this word, and it's going to sound hilarious. Pugnator. Like, it's spelled Pugnator. What else could it be? Now, the irony is that a pug doesn't look great. It's like ugly cute. And this car from the front end is ugly. So, I don't even know if it's ugly cute. The Purosangue, I do like how it looks as a standard Ferrari SUV. It's fine. I mean, I like it. I understand its point, its purpose. I'm not taking that over a true Ferrari supercar or sports car, but for the people that can afford Ferraris and say, like, I don't want to drive the Range Rover today, I could see them saying, well, keep the lineage going, give me a Ferrari SUV I can pick up groceries with. So you can see this picture. This is outrageous. Burgundy, carbon, forged carbon. The interior is all white. Clearly you can't get anything other than linen pants or sweatpants because, I mean, you're just going to stain everything. It looks crazy, but back to what I was saying before, this is like getting to what I was talking about exclusivity in my last episode, in episode 65. I was talking about how the Mustang GTD is going to perform well or sell well because it's exclusive. And something like this is like for the Dubai sheiks. It's about the billionaires of this world that are like, my closest friends have Ferrari Purosangues. I cannot have the same looking one. Think of this like high fashion. Like, if you ever watched like a Paris Fashion Week runway show from like Rick Owens or something, and you're looking at them walk down the aisle with massive platform shoes and balloons on their head, you're like, who's rocking this? Like, who's wearing the garbage bags with LV logos on it down the street? And then you'll see a video of somebody doing that, and you're like, okay, clearly that's their bag. They're in that crazy world of fashion. Think of this car and what Mansory does the same way. We're going to shoot for the outrageous, and it ain't going to be to your taste. But here's one thing you can say is that nobody, when you go to valet, is going to pull up next to you and say, oh, you got one of those too? Nobody's going to have them. So they made one with the Ferrari Purosangue. I don't know how they don't have a cease and desist now, because Ferrari be sending those out for anybody that even wraps their emblem in something else. I think maybe they get away with it with some loophole because they don't call it the Ferrari Purosangue by Mansory. They say like Mansory Pugnator, which is that name is, yo, man, that name is nuts. Like, I don't even know how they came up with that. Now, get into some more regular news just to kind of, get down the channels. The Prelude came back up in the news because there was a rumor that it could have a manual transmission similar to the old Honda CRZ. And I'm not going to spend a few minutes on this. Not even. The idea of that is the idea of a manual Prelude obviously is something that I've talked about before when they first announced it, but they've already said that it's a hybrid. So Honda doesn't have a hybrid setup that involves the Prelude, right? They don't have a manual hybrid car. They used to have a hybrid Civic to get a manual. They had the CRZ, but their drivetrain they're set up now no longer has that. So they don't have another manual hybrid car. So what I was thinking when I first heard this rumor, I was like, man, if they put the new 2025 Civic hybrid powertrain in there with 200 horsepower, 232 foot-pounds of torque on a 6-speed manual, we got a winner. Like, straight up. You don't even got to try hard. It's a layup. It's right there at the board. All they have to do is just lay it in, and we're good. It's an alley-oop, That's all you got to do, Honda. But then I read an article from Motor Trend that actually shed some light on how they don't really believe the rumor, because the way their Civic Hybrid powertrain is set up with their transmission, they use more like a CVT style transmission, and the absence of a manual one and all the retooling they would have to do, they suspect is going to be some version of some transmission that kind of fakes shifts, or a sport version of some CVT direct connected, or some transmission they have, not a traditional one, and definitely not a manual one. And when they mentioned that and kind of broke down what they were talking about inside of the article, I agree with them. I was like, that kind of makes sense, because you're right. They don't have anything right now that kind of matches the CRZ, and the CRZ wasn't a success. We talk about it now because now we're like, oh, that was really cool at that time. But when they were trying to push that and have efficiency in a hatchback that was kind of sporty, the manual one was not as efficient as the CVT equipped one. So it didn't really sell well. However many manual ones there are, it's for the people that wanted the rebirth of the CRX. That's what the CRZ was kind of based off of, and people wanted to relive that again, but it didn't really work that way. It was only for one generation, and then it was done. So the Prelude, if they did do this, it would be great. But then if they put a manual in, they have the hybrid powertrain, and they're really trying to shoot for like sporty hybrid efficiency, similar to what the CRZ was, then they're getting kind of close to like, this is a true like sports coupe or a sport compact, similar to like above the SI, like I've said before, under the Civic Type R. So it could get confusing. It probably would cost them a lot more money if they don't already have this in the pipeline. So I don't know. I do know the rumor did pique my interest, because I was like, man, if they could really pull this off when it comes to having a full-on manual transmission inside of this version, I mean, I don't know what to say. That would be absolutely fire. Now, getting back to Toyota, I wanted to talk about something that they rumored. Not, well, I'll say rumor, but this has a lot of legs, and it has a lot of future in it. So if you know Toyota, if you know the aftermarket, if you know their previous cars like a Toyota Supra specifically, then we all know about the famous 2JZ motor, okay? The one with the memes of Jay-Z and two of his heads under the hood. We know the Fast and Furious thing, when they opened the hood, it said Jay-Z. Like we all know about the 2JZ, because that's just how famous and how powerful and how efficient and how much the aftermarket has tuned and tooled things for that motor, right? And so an engineer for Toyota said recently that his aim is to surpass that motor with a 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder. Let me tell you, there are times when you set a lofty goal, and this man shot for the stars, because by the aftermarket standards, I'm not saying that the 2JZ is a technological advancement based on today's ability of how they build a motor. I'm just talking about how loved it is, how much the aftermarket stands by it, how much stuff is still made to this day for that engine, okay? So to say, I'm trying to surpass it, you got some major shoes to fill. So let me tell you what they're talking about. Many episodes ago, I talked about Toyota was doubling down on making efficient, fun, powerful motors. They did this because, one, you already see what's happening with the EV landscape. It is ebb and flow, it's up and down. Many of the ideas that the OEM manufacturers had when it came to their lineup of what they were going to do have changed. They have literally gone back to the drawing board and said, yeah, we were wrong. People aren't buying EVs like that. We need to get back to making some decent cars at a decent price point. So Toyota, in their hindsight, which is clearly their foresight, they saw that coming and said, we're going to be making motors, and we're going to do hybrids, and that's what we got here. So they have a slew of four-cylinder motors coming, 1.5 liter to 2 liters, NA and turbo. All of them with the ability to have electrification, which goes back to that hybrid setup I was talking about. So they've been working on these motors. It's been news. They've been rumored to do it. We have caught glimpses of this 2-liter 4 inside of a car that we suspect is either the new MR2 or the Celica that the engineers are driving. We heard it shifting fast, either on the DHE transmission or maybe some new dual clutch, but it sounded good. is rumored to have 400 horsepower, and is designed based off of what he's saying is basically that it can handle a large amount of horsepower. And that is why the 2JZ is so famous. See, what I say is, or what I've read, and I don't have full information on if this is truly the case. A lot of the motors that we know of from these heydays, right, from the Hondas and Toyotas, when they made these engines that have lasted 500,000 miles, or how strong the 2JZ engine was because they were overbuilding, or ended up overbuilding for the sake of longevity and reliability. So you ended up with these really strong blocks, forged internals that you didn't really even know you needed. And then when the aftermarket got a hold of it and realized, do you know that the 2JZ, if you put this and this thing can handle like 800 to 1,000 horsepower on the stock engine. You don't got to do nothing. The aftermarket explodes. So that's why the 2JZ is so famous. So they're building, let's say this 2-liter 4-cylinder that this engineer says, my goal is to surpass the 2JZ. It makes 400 horsepower normally is what they're saying it's going to do, right? And I don't think that they cannot not do this. See, the GR Corolla has a G16, what's it called, the G16E motor, and it's 100 horsepower per cylinder. So 3-cylinder turbo makes 300 horsepower, up to 295 foot-pounds of torque. It performs. It is exactly what you think. Now, obviously, the aftermarket for that motor isn't as crazy as the 2JZ is for now. And also, it can handle the wild amount of power that engine could, but that was also with inline twin turbo 6. This is a 3-cylinder turbo, different structure, and they constructed it differently. But what I'm saying is Toyota's building motors that can do crazy things in small packages. So 4-liter turbo 4 at 400 horsepower is not crazy. Mercedes and AMG have been throwing that stuff in the new C-Class AMG, and them things make like 600 horsepower. Now, speaking of that, there is another prototype of a Lexus IS sedan and an RC coupe. The IS sedan is said to have had an 8-speed automatic, which, remember the new GR Corolla, the 2025 one, has a DAT 8-speed transmission. I'm willing to bet it's the same one. They said that has 400 horsepower, 2-liter 4-cylinder they're talking about. Then they said there's an Lexus RC coupe testing with a 600 horsepower turbo 4 and a 6-speed manual. Let me tell you something. If we're about to get 600 horsepower manual coupes, luxury coupes, we are in for some exciting times. Like, if Toyota's really gearing up to have this lineup of 4-cylinders, and obviously 1.5 to 2-liter, we can have like 150 horsepower, 200, 300, so on and so forth. So they're making a full lineup, which means that maybe later on the GR Corolla switches from a 3-cylinder to a 4-cylinder. Or maybe the Celica has a 350 horsepower 4-cylinder, or a 300 horsepower one. Or maybe the MR2 gets to 400 one. Whatever it may be, that engineer isn't far off. I know it sounds crazy, but if they have a version of that same 4-cylinder that makes 400 in one car and then 600 in another, this could be like the best 4-cylinder turbo the aftermarket's ever touched. And if it's making that much across the board, a 200 horsepower spread, it means that the upper reaches of it could get into the 700 range. Who knows? I do know that to talk that crazy about that motor and say I'm looking to surpass it means that he must know about it. He probably has one sitting in his laboratory where he's engineering and saying, I'm going to show you all the stuff he did there. I'm going to do the same thing here. I can't wait to see what happens. The Celica, the MR2, Lexus, RC, all this stuff that's happening. Manual 600 horsepower RC coupe. My goodness. That would be a true RCF version. If they made something like that. Now, of course, there are going to be people that say I wanted the V6 or the V8. But I mean, I'm not knocking it regardless, right? Lighter weight, it could be faster revving, higher revs, still gets the power, still gets the performance. It's good. It's good. Now, before I get up out of here, GR Corolla Updates, you know, our favorite segment, okay? And some other news. So, on the YouTube channel, like, subscribe, go follow it. I put on a new intake again. I know I already had an intake on there, but I put on a new MSC Performance version 2 intake. It looks great. It performs great. I did a review on it. I love the way the car drives. It feels faster. It feels good. It feels peppier. The butt dyno tells me I've gained approximately 6.7 horsepower, but it's great. I love it. I got more things In front of me on this camera is a turbo inlet from 6 Element, which is another great company that does work with. I'm sure I'm going to end up with their intercooler. Hopefully we can work out something. You know, I got some ideas and I've talked with them enough. I run their exhaust as well. Great company, great people that run it. So I have their turbo inlet. I put on the intake. I have to go talk to my friend and get some other clamps to put on this because we want to make sure everything's secure when I put it on. But turbo inlet's coming next. Next would be intercooler. Next is going to be charge pipes. Next is going to be an elbow for the intake. And at that point in time, other than maybe adding like an oil cooler, which obviously I don't track the car 24/7. I'll eventually make it to one, but I don't track the car like that. So some people can say it's not necessary, though I know in my spirit of drives, I've seen up to 225 on the oil, but I digress. That's a whole long diatribe that you can go online for GR Corolla forums and GR yards and talk about that. But I like to do what I'm comfortable doing. So that's probably something in my future. Then I'm going to have to tune it. At that point, I'll decide to tune it because I'll put all the things on. There is one more item I would like to do, which is a well speed intake to kind of just throw it on and see what the car does without touching anything. I want to kind of have the tuning option ready to go. And I want to put all this stuff on at the end and then drive it and see what happens. Does it throw a check engine light? Does the car lose all its power? And I like to report. I like to make a video saying, let me show you what happens when you do all this and how the car is performing. Especially by that time, I'll probably have like 50,000 miles. So I'll be able to really tell people how this car is going. So the future is bright. The channel has a lot more ideas and more things coming. I cannot wait. And especially before I go, the SEMA news is building up. I'm seeing people on Instagram talk about the SEMA builds, the cars they're bringing there, manufacturers saying we got new wheels showing up, we got new products. I cannot wait. I literally sit around and I have a little anxiety actually because I'm thinking about how am I going to capture all this in a way that makes sense for the channel and provide something that I hadn't seen before when it comes to people doing the SEMA show. Now, there are a lot of videos I've seen where people do SEMA walkthroughs where they just walk and have the video recording and just show everything. I don't necessarily want to do that because that's me walking through every single booth and just scanning every single card and every single bit of product. And I don't want to do that because I want to do it from an car enthusiast standpoint of myself too. Like I also want to make sure that I'm doing what I'm passionate about and what I want to see. So I'm going to find the car builds from the YouTubers I follow the big companies, follow the aftermarket parts. And like I said, I have my wife there. So she's already like, what do you want me to do? What's my role? What's my motivation? You know, I'm going to be like, we got to have this camera up and running and we got to do podcast every day. I'm doing live vlogging. I'm doing a lot. And I'm also networking. The reason why I'm excited is because I get to be in front of these people that I've talked to on emails, some people that have messaged me, some people that have DM'd me. And I know it sounds crazy in my small YouTube or Instagram following type of way, but I've gotten the attention of certain people. And I want to now go put my face in front of them and shake their hand and say, hey, what can I do with you? What can I do for you? How can I be in front of the product? Let me get in front of it. Let me talk. Let me review it. Let me put it on the car. Let's collaborate. So I hope it will go well. I don't even hope. I'm going to pray it's going to go well. We're going to benefit from it. I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to go to the next year. And I'm going to keep working my way up. That's all this is about. Steps, baby steps. So as I always say, thanks for joining. Glad you can come here for another episode of the podcast. As I always say, do as you wish and do as you may. I'm going to catch you on the next one. I'll see y'all around. Peace.